Ancient chants once echoed to summon cosmic forces beyond human sight. We are about to journey into the heart of early Vedic India to uncover 30 of its most profound and mysterious rites. You will discover the secret world of rituals that were far more than simple ceremonies. They were daring attempts to grasp and command the very fabric of reality. How did a simple plant brew promise communion with the gods? What profound power did kings believe they could harness by sacrificing a single roaming horse? By the end of our exploration, you will understand how an entire civilization sought to weave its destiny into the cosmos through fire, mantra, and sacrifice. What does it truly mean to try and speak with the universe? The heart of this ancient world beat to the rhythm of a simple yet profound daily ritual. Every single dawn and dusk in countless Vedic households, a sacred fire was kindled. This was the Agnihotra, the perpetual fire sacrifice, an act so essential it was the very pulse of existence. At its core was Agni, the fire god, who was far more than just flame. He was the divine messenger, the conduit between the human and the celestial realms. To let this fire die out was to sever the connection to the gods themselves. The timing was everything, governed by a cosmic clock. As the first sliver of sun broke the horizon at sunrise, and again as it vanished at sunset, the householder would make an offering. Into the flames would go a mixture of milk and clarified butter known as ghee. This was not merely feeding a fire, it was a delicate, precise operation. The pure white milk and the golden ghee represented the finest essences of life, given freely back to the powers that sustained it. But what was the true purpose behind this relentless, twice-daily devotion? It was about maintaining RTA, the fundamental order of the cosmos. The Vedic people saw the universe as a perfectly balanced machine, and human rituals were the oil that kept its gears turning. They believed the sun did not rise by mere chance. Its journey across the sky each day had to be secured, encouraged, and powered by these daily sacrifices. The Agnihotra was a gentle, persistent push against the chaos of night, a human act of faith that helped ensure the sun would, without fail, return each morning. This simple domestic rite was, in their view, a thread woven directly into the fabric of reality, holding everything together. But the daily fire was only the beginning. To truly touch the divine, the Vedic priests turned to something far more potent, a mysterious plant whose true identity remains one of history's great enigmas. This was the Soma sacrifice, the most celebrated and secretive of all Vedic rites. At its heart was a plant known only as Soma, which was not merely an offering but a god in its own right. The entire ritual was a dramatic, multi-day event centered on extracting the plant's sacred juice. Priests would gather around a pressing stone, chanting powerful hymns as they crushed the Soma stalks with stones. The resulting liquid, a bitter, milky sap, was filtered through woolen strainers into a large wooden vat. This was not a quiet ceremony. It was a vibrant, communal effort to create the elixir of the gods. The freshly pressed juice, believed to be the very essence of life and immortality, was then offered to the deities. The great storm god Indra was the primary recipient, said to drink vast quantities to fuel his cosmic battles against chaos and drought. But the priests partook as well, consuming the remaining liquid. The effects were described as nothing short of miraculous. The Rigveda sings of Soma bestowing immense strength, radiant health, and visions of brilliant light. It lifted the drinker to a state of ecstatic exhilaration, a feeling of boundless power and direct communion with the divine. They felt invincible, enlightened, as if the boundaries between the human soul and the infinite cosmos had simply melted away. So what was this incredible plant? The question has haunted scholars for centuries. The original Soma plant vanished so completely from use that its identity is a profound mystery. Some theories point to ephedra, a shrub containing the stimulant ephedrine, which could explain feelings of energy and vitality. Others suggest it might have been a potent psychedelic mushroom like the Amanita muscaria, which could induce the profound visionary states the texts describe. There is even speculation it was a type of rue or a plant that has since gone extinct. The truth is, we may never know. The Soma sacrifice represents humanity's timeless yearning to transcend ordinary existence, to taste a power beyond ourselves. It was a ritual where a simple plant became a bridge to the heavens, leaving behind a mystery that still captivates us today. Yet the quest for divine connection through a single plant paled in comparison to a ritual of staggering ambition. This was the Ashvamedha, the horse sacrifice, a spectacle of power that unfolded over an entire year and was designed for one purpose alone: to proclaim a king as an undisputed universal sovereign. It began with the selection of a single, flawless stallion, a creature of pure white or radiant black, unblemished and full of vigor. This horse was not just an animal, it was a living, breathing symbol of the king's own royal authority and the untamed power of his kingdom. In an elaborate ceremony, the horse was consecrated and set free. For one full year, this sacred steed was allowed to roam wherever it wished, accompanied by a full contingent of the king's most elite warriors. The path this horse took was not random, it was a divine declaration. Any territory the horse wandered into was considered to be under the king's protection, and by extension, his dominion. Local chieftains and rival kings faced a stark choice. They could either submit to the authority of the horse's owner, or they could challenge his warriors to battle. This roaming was a year-long, mobile test of the king's political and military might, a constant, living proclamation of his expanding empire. After the year had passed, if the horse and its guardians returned victorious, the ritual reached its breathtaking climax. The horse was welcomed back with immense celebration and a series of profound symbolic acts. In a ceremony that modern minds find challenging to comprehend, the chief queen would engage in a ritualized, symbolic mating with the slain horse. This was not a literal act, but a powerful piece of sacred theater. It represented the union of the earthly queen with the cosmic, virile power of the stallion, a union meant to channel that raw, creative energy directly into the land and the royal lineage itself. The final act was the sacrifice of the horse itself. Its breath was offered to the wind, its body parts distributed in a precise, cosmic pattern, all meant to infuse the entire kingdom with vitality, fertility, and unshakable power. The Ashvamedha was more than a ritual. It was a year-long drama of political theater, spiritual belief, and raw imperial ambition, all converging on the journey of a single sacred animal. But the Ashvamedha was a declaration of power meant for the world to see. Another, even more complex ritual worked to forge that power from within, transforming a mere mortal into a divine ruler. This was the Rajasuya, the royal consecration. A year-long tapestry of symbolic acts designed to prove a king was chosen by the cosmos itself. The ceremony was a grueling test, a theatrical performance where every gesture was loaded with meaning. It began with a seemingly simple dice game. The king would sit down to play, but in a stunning twist, the rules were rigged in his favor. He was not only permitted to cheat, he was expected to. This was not about teaching dishonesty. It was a profound lesson in sovereignty. The message was that a true king operates beyond ordinary laws. His luck, his fortune, was a divine gift, a sign that the universe itself was stacking the odds in his favor. A win confirmed his righteous place on the throne. Next came the cow raid, a staged event pulsating with symbolic violence. The king's men would rush into a pen and seize a single cow and her calf from a priest. This was not a true theft, but a carefully orchestrated drama of conflict. The priest would protest, a mock struggle would ensue, and the king's warriors would triumphantly carry the animals away. This ritual reenacted the fundamental duty of a king, to protect his people and secure their wealth, even if it meant taking from the powerful priestly class. It was a public demonstration that the king's authority could command all resources for the good of the kingdom. perhaps the most dramatic test was the chariot drive. The king would mount his chariot and charge directly towards the territorial boundaries of his rivals. This was a blatant, aggressive provocation. The unspoken question hung in the air: would anyone dare to challenge him? If a rival king stepped forward, it could mean war. But if the chariot raced unopposed across the frontier, it was the ultimate sign of submission and recognition. His enemies, by their silence, were acknowledging his supreme authority. Each of these stages, from the loaded dice to the defiant chariot ride, was a piece of a grand puzzle. Together, they constructed the image of the ideal Vedic king, a man blessed with supernatural luck, undeniable virility, and the courage to defend his realm. The Rajasuya did not just crown a man, it attempted to weave his very being into the cosmic order, making him the living, breathing center of his world. While kings proved their might through political theater, the quest for ultimate power turned inward to a ritual designed to forge a human into a vessel of cosmic force. This was the Vajrapya, the drink of strength, a profound Soma ceremony that promised not just royal authority, but supreme vitality and spiritual ascension. The entire ritual was a grand spectacle of symbolic victory, a carefully orchestrated drama where the patron, often a king or a chieftain, was guaranteed to win against the universe itself. One of its most striking events was a ritual chariot race. 17 chariots would be arranged, with the patron's chariot placed strategically in the center. At a signal, they would all race towards a defined goal, yet this was no ordinary competition. The race was fixed. The patron's chariot was always intended to cross the finish line first. But why stage a race with a predetermined winner? The victory was not over other men. It was a symbolic triumph over the 17 layers of time and space, a declaration that the patron's energy now surpassed all cosmic cycles. Winning the race was a public, dramatic affirmation that he was the focal point of all victorious power in the cosmos. An even more potent symbol followed: the ritual of the ladder. A specially consecrated ladder, pointing directly toward the heavens, was placed beside the sacrificial post. The patron, holding a bow and arrow, would climb its 17 rungs. With each step upward, he was literally and figuratively ascending beyond the earthly realm. Upon reaching the top, he would shoot an arrow into each of the 4 cardinal directions. This act was a breathtaking claim of sovereignty. From that elevated state, he was proclaiming his dominance over the entire world, all while reaching for the world of the gods. The entire ceremony culminated, as its name suggests, in the drinking of a special, supercharged Soma brew. This was the true drink of strength, the essence of the ritual's power. By consuming it, the patron was internalizing all the victorious energy he had just ritually enacted. He did not just win a race, he drank victory itself. He did not just climb a ladder, he consumed the ability to ascend. The Vajrapya was the ultimate spiritual reinforcement, a ritual that sought to saturate a human soul with the very forces that govern reality. Yet the ultimate offering was not a plant or an animal, but the human being itself. We now encounter the Ashvamedha, a rite so shrouded in controversy that its very nature has been debated for centuries. The ancient texts describe a ritual strikingly similar to the Ashvamedha, but with a terrifying substitution. Instead of a horse, a man was selected. He was treated as the sacred offering, adorned and bound to the sacrificial post, just as an animal would be. The air would have been thick with tension, the chants building to a terrifying crescendo. But at the very last moment, as the blade was about to fall, the man was released. He was set free, unharmed. This was not a literal human sacrifice. It was a profound piece of sacred drama, a symbolic act of immense philosophical depth. The entire ritual was a reenactment of the original cosmic sacrifice found in the Rig Veda, the sacrifice of the primordial giant Purusha. According to the hymn, the entire universe was created from the dismembered body of this cosmic being. From his mind came the moon, from his eye the sun, from his breath the wind. The entire social order, the four Varnas, were said to have sprung from his body. The Purushamedha was a ritual designed to echo that first world-creating act. By symbolically offering a human, the participants were connecting their own ritual to the very origins of existence. The man bound to the post represented every human and the entire cosmos. His release was the crucial key. It signified that the true sacrifice was not the killing of a person, but the surrender of the individual ego, the offering of one's own limited self back into the infinite cosmic whole. The ritual was a powerful lesson that creation itself is sustained not by death, but by a continuous cycle of symbolic offering and release. It asked a profound question of its participants and now of us. What part of yourself would you be willing to bind to the post and offer up to keep the universe in balance? Even the symbolic offering of a single human life was not the final frontier of Vedic ritual ambition. The ultimate sacrifice demanded nothing less than everything. This was the Ashvamedha, the all-sacrifice, a rite of such radical renunciation that it was likely more a philosophical ideal than a common practice. The premise was as simple as it was staggering. A king at the peak of his power would offer up his entire world. This was not a symbolic gesture. The ritual called for him to give away every single thing he possessed, every treasure, every parcel of land, his entire kingdom, and even the people within it, including his own family. He would offer it all without reservation to the priests. Imagine the scene: a monarch, the very center of wealth and authority, voluntarily divesting himself of every marker of his identity, standing utterly alone. What could possibly be the goal of such an extreme act? It was not to gain more power, but to achieve the ultimate spiritual liberation known as moksha. The Ashvamedha was the final, logical conclusion of the Vedic quest. If the Purushamedha was about sacrificing the ego, the Ashvamedha was about sacrificing the entire universe that ego had built. By letting go of every attachment, every possession, and every relationship, the king sought to break the final chains binding him to the cycle of rebirth. He was not seeking to become one with the cosmos, but to transcend it entirely. The philosophical implications are breathtaking. This ritual presents a profound paradox. A king's entire duty, as shown in the Rajasuya, was to build and protect a kingdom, to be the pillar of the social and cosmic order. Yet here, the highest spiritual achievement required him to abandon that very duty, to renounce the world he was sworn to uphold. It suggests that the Vedic mind understood a deep truth, that ultimate freedom lies not in controlling the world, but in releasing our grasp on it completely. The Ashvamedha stands as a monumental question mark at the edge of Vedic thought. What does it mean to win the ultimate game, only to give all the prizes back? But the path to divine ecstasy was not always direct. Before the Soma could be pressed, another secret rite unfolded, one that harnessed the raw, terrifying power of fire itself. This was the Pravajya, a ceremony centered on a single, unassuming object, a clay pot called the Mahavira. The name means the great hero, and this pot was about to undergo a trial by fire. The priests would place the humble clay vessel directly into the heart of the blazing sacrificial fire. They did not just warm it, they heated it with a furious, focused intensity, stoking the flames until the pot glowed with a fierce, blinding white heat. It became a miniature sun, a vessel containing a piece of the sun's own fury. Then came the climax. A priest would pour fresh milk directly onto the searing surface of the pot. The reaction was instant and violent. The milk did not just boil, it erupted in a great, sizzling hiss, releasing a plume of aromatic steam that rose like a sacrifice to the sky. This explosive libation was offered not to Indra, the king of gods, but to the Ashvins, the divine twin physicians of the cosmos. Why this dramatic spectacle? The Pravajya was a ritual of regeneration, a symbolic act of healing and rebirth for the sun itself. The Vedic people saw the sun not as a constant, unwavering ball of light, but as a force that grew weary. Each evening it grew weak and died in the west, and each morning it had to be reborn in the east, fresh and full of vitality. The glowing Mahavira pot was that tired, aged sun. The pouring of the milk was the infusion of new life, a potent, energizing elixir administered by the divine healers, the Ashvins. That explosive sizzle was the sound of the sun being revived, its strength restored for another day's journey. In this single, intense moment, the priests were not just offering a libation, they were participating in the daily miracle of cosmic renewal, using fire and milk to help rebirth the very source of all light and life. These dramatic transformations did not happen by chance. Before any grand ritual could begin, the participants had to be unmade and remade through a profound process of initiation. This was the Diksha, a consecration that was far more than a simple blessing. It was a symbolic death and rebirth. The central figures, the sacrificer and his wife, voluntarily stepped away from their ordinary lives. They entered a state of seclusion, becoming like embryos in a cosmic womb, preparing for a new spiritual existence. They undertook severe vows, abstaining from certain foods, from pleasures, and even from casual speech. The husband donned the skin of a black antelope, a powerful symbol of his new, sacred identity. He was no longer merely a man, he was a being set apart, being stripped of his old self to be reborn as a vessel fit for the divine. His wife's role was equally vital, her presence ensuring the ritual's completeness and its power to generate fertility and blessings. Together, they endured this austerity, shedding their worldly identities to be spiritually forged anew for the cosmic work ahead. This period of consecration bled directly into the next phase, the Upasada, a trial of relentless focus. During the great Soma rituals, this was a time of intense austerity. The word itself suggests drawing near, an approach to the divine through sheer exertion. 3 times a day, at dawn, noon, and evening, the priests performed a series of pressings and offerings. This was not a leisurely ceremony. Each session was a fierce, concentrated burst of activity. The Soma stalks were pressed, the sacred fire was kindled, and offerings were made to deities like Indra and Agni with urgent, forceful hymns. The participants, including the consecrated sacrificer, were required to observe a strict fast for the entire day, their physical hunger mirroring a spiritual yearning. The Upasada was a marathon of devotion, a cycle of effort and restraint repeated until the boundaries between the human and the divine began to feel thin. It was in this heightened state, forged by the Diksha and tempered by the Upasada, that they became ready to host the gods themselves. This sacred work of consecration and focus demanded a permanent home, a spiritual hearth from which all other rituals could blaze forth. Before even the first daily offering of the Agnihotra could begin, the fires themselves had to be born in a ceremony of profound significance, the Agnihotra. This was the establishment of the sacred fires, a complex one-day ritual that marked the true beginning of a householder's religious life. It was not simply about lighting a fire, it was about invoking Agni, the fire god, to take up a permanent and structured residence. The priest would not kindle just one fire, but 3 distinct flames, each with its own name, its own specific shape, and its own cosmic purpose. The first was the Garhapatya fire, the household fire. This was a circular flame, symbolizing the womb and the nurturing heart of the home. It was the source from which all other fires were lit, the domestic center of the universe. From it, the priest would light the Ahavaniya fire, a square flame representing the celestial realm. This was the fire of offerings, the one into which sacrifices were directly made, a direct line to the gods. Finally, there was the Dakshinagni, the southern fire. This semicircular flame served as a protective barrier, a guardian placed between the sacred space of the ritual and the unknown, often dangerous, forces of the south. It was a fire of defense and purification. The careful creation of these 3 fires was an act of cosmic architecture, building a miniature, ordered universe on a patch of consecrated earth. Once established, these flames became the living, breathing soul of the household, and this is where the daily Agnihotra revealed its deeper purpose. The simple act of pouring milk into the Ahvaniya fire at dawn and dusk was more than a duty. It was the perpetual breath of this spiritual hearth. The fire was a living entity, and to let it die was a spiritual catastrophe, a severing of the family's connection to the divine order. The householder became the guardian of a cosmic outpost, his home a node in a vast network of light and sacrifice spanning the land. Every sunrise and sunset, his offering was a gentle pulse, a reminder to the cosmos and to himself that the sacred contract of existence was still honored. The flame that was born in the Agnihotra was kept alive for a lifetime, a single, unbroken thread of smoke and prayer connecting one human family to the endless cycle of the heavens. The sacred fires were not just for daily offerings, but for aligning human life with the great turning of the world. This alignment found its most profound expression in the Chaturmasya, the 4 monthly sacrifices. Performed at the cusp of each of the 3 main seasons, this was a ritual calendar written in smoke and prayer, a direct plea to the cosmos for the most fundamental needs of life. It was the community's way of actively participating in the rhythm of the agricultural year, ensuring that the rains would come, the crops would grow, and the people would prosper. Each of the 3 seasonal sacrifices was a distinct event tailored to the specific energies and deities of that time. The cycle began with the Vasanta sacrifice, marking the start of the gentle, blossoming spring. This was a time of planting and new beginnings, and the offerings reflected this delicate phase. Priests would make simple sacrifices of milk and curds, gentle and nurturing foods, to benevolent deities like the Maruts, the storm gods who brought the life-giving rains. The goal was to coax the clouds, to encourage the gentle showers that would nourish the newly sown seeds. As the sun grew stronger and the world moved into the fierce heat of Grishma, the summer, the ritual shifted. This was the time for the Vaisakha sacrifice. The offerings became more substantial, moving from milk to the first fruits of the season and sacred plants. The deities invoked now were often the fierce and powerful Rudra, the howler, the god of storms and healing. The community was no longer coaxing the rains, they were urgently petitioning for them, seeking to appease the volatile forces that could either grant a bounty or unleash a drought. The ritual acknowledged the raw, untamed power of nature at its peak. Finally, as the year turned towards the cool, harvesting season of Sharad, the autumn, the 3rd sacrifice, the Sharadiya, was performed. This was a ceremony of gratitude and culmination. The offerings now included the full bounty of the harvest, grains like barley and rice, a tangible thank you to the gods for their provision. The focus turned to deities of order and stability, reinforcing the cosmic law that had once again provided for the people. The Chaturmasya wove the community directly into the fabric of the seasons. It was a continuous 4-part conversation with the universe, a ritual acknowledgement that human survival was not separate from the turning of the earth, but entirely dependent on it. While kings sought power and priests sought cosmic order, the gods themselves sometimes needed a restorative boost. The Sautramani was a unique and potent ritual dedicated to the great god Indra, designed specifically to reinvigorate him after his most legendary battles. Imagine the scene: the mighty slayer of the dragon Vritra, the champion who released the waters of life, now weary and depleted from his cosmic exertions. This ceremony was his divine energy drink, a ritual of healing meant to restore the king of the gods to his full, formidable strength. The central offering was not the sacred Soma, but its earthly, more visceral counterpart, Sura, a powerful fermented liquor made from grain or rice. This was a raw, intoxicating brew, a substance of the earth offered to a celestial power. The ritual was a complex, symbolic drama. Priests would prepare 3 main offerings in special cups. One cup contained Sura for Indra, another held a mixture of curds for the Ashvins, the divine healers. A third contained a special porridge for the goddess Saraswati, the embodiment of wisdom and flowing speech. The patron of the ritual, the man who commissioned it, was not a passive observer. He was deeply woven into the ceremony's restorative magic. After the initial offerings to the gods, the patron and his wife would consume the remaining sura and curds. This was not mere feasting, it was an act of profound sympathetic magic. By partaking in the same strengthening substances offered to Indra, they believed they were channeling that divine vitality directly into their own beings. The ritual was a circuit of power. The patron provided the offering to strengthen the god, and the strengthened god, in turn, bestowed that recovered power back upon the patron. This created a cycle of mutual rejuvenation. The Sotramani reveals a fascinating aspect of the Vedic worldview. The relationship between humans and gods was not a one-way street. The deities were not distant, untouchable figures. They could grow weak, they could be injured in their cosmic duties, and they relied on human rituals to replenish their strength. In performing the Sotramani, humanity became a partner in maintaining the health of the cosmos itself, offering the god of thunder a much-needed drink so he could continue to hold up the sky. But even as the community aligned itself with the seasons, there existed a powerful undercurrent of ritual that flowed in the opposite direction. This was the Keshavapaniya, the letting loose of the hair, a rite that temporarily dissolved the very social order other ceremonies worked so hard to maintain. In the carefully structured world of Vedic society, where every action was governed by rules, a woman's hair was a potent symbol. Tied up and bound, it represented control, civilization, and her place within the domestic order. To let it down was to step outside that structure, to embrace a state of raw, untamed nature. During this ceremony, women would deliberately unbraid their hair, allowing it to fall freely over their shoulders. This was not an act of casual relaxation. It was a deliberate, sacred unleashing of primal power. The ceremony acknowledged a fundamental truth that before there was order, there was wildness, and that this wildness held a creative and protective force essential for life itself. By releasing their hair, the women were channeling that raw, elemental energy. They became conduits for the fertile, chaotic power of the earth, a force that could not be contained by the walls of a home or the rules of society. This ritual was often performed to invoke protection for the community or to appeal for fertility in the land and among the people. It recognized that the blessings of abundance and safety did not come from order alone, but required a temporary, sanctioned return to the source of all creation. For a brief, sacred moment, the women were not merely householders, they were the very embodiment of the untamed earth, their flowing hair a ritual storm of life and potential, reminding everyone that civilization is forever rooted in the wild. While the gods received offerings of fire and Soma, the Vedic people knew their obligations stretched beyond the heavens, reaching into the silent realms of the departed. The Mahapitriyajna, the great offering to the ancestors, was a solemn, essential duty that bound the living to the dead. This was not a celebration, but a sacred transaction of love and remembrance, a ritual to nourish the very beings who had given them life. At its heart were the Pitas, the forefathers, who were not seen as distant ghosts, but as conscious, powerful entities residing in their own celestial abode, a world of light and peace. Their condition in that afterlife, however, was believed to be directly sustained by the actions of their living descendants. Without these offerings, the ancestors could languish, becoming weak and forgotten, unable to bestow their blessings upon the family line. The ritual centered on two simple yet profoundly symbolic offerings. The first was tarpan, the libation of water. A descendant would sit facing south, the direction associated with the ancestors, and slowly pour cool water mixed with sesame seeds from the palm of their hand. Each drop was a drink offered across the cosmic divide, a gesture of reverence quenching the thirst of those who could no longer drink from earthly streams. The second offering was the pinda, a specially prepared rice ball. These were not mere lumps of food. They were meticulously shaped, often mixed with honey, ghee, and milk, creating a dense, nourishing essence. The ritual involved offering a series of these pindas one by one, each one symbolically building a new spiritual body for the ancestors, sustaining their existence in the other world. But the purpose was not one-sided. This was a cycle of mutual care. By feeding the pittas, the living ensured the ancestors remained strong, happy, and benevolent. A contented ancestor became a powerful guardian spirit, watching over the family, ensuring the health of children, the fertility of the land, and the continuity of the lineage itself. The Mahapitriyajna wove an unbroken chain of obligation and grace, reminding everyone that the family was a single entity stretching across the fragile boundary between life and death. To forget this duty was to risk severing the roots of the family tree, leaving it to wither in both this world and the next. This intricate web of obligation, reaching from the gods to the ancestors, was woven into the very fabric of daily life through a profound ethical code. The Panchamahayajnas were the 5 great daily duties, a constant reminder that to live was to be in a state of perpetual, grateful exchange with the entire cosmos. This was not a single ceremony, but a way of being, a spiritual economy where every breath incurred a debt that had to be repaid with conscious action. The first duty was the Deva Yajna, the sacrifice to the gods. This was the familiar offering into the sacred fire, that daily pulse of milk and ghee sent skyward to sustain Agni and the celestial powers. It acknowledged that the sun, the rain, and the very air were unearned gifts requiring gratitude. The second was the Pitri Yajna, the sacrifice to the ancestors. Each day, a small offering of water or a morsel of food was set aside for the forefathers, a quiet moment of remembrance that kept the chain of lineage strong and the past alive in the present. The third duty shifted focus from the family line to the river of knowledge. This was the Rishi Yajna, the sacrifice to the sages. It was fulfilled through daily study, the recitation of the sacred Vedas. By chanting the hymns passed down through generations, the householder was not merely reading, he was offering his voice back to the ancient seers who had first heard these cosmic truths. He was keeping their wisdom vibrating in the world, a living library of divine sound. The fourth duty turned the gaze outward to the community. The Nara Yajna was the sacrifice to humans, and it took the beautifully simple form of hospitality. The arrival of a guest at one's door was not an inconvenience, it was a sacred opportunity. To offer a stranger food, water, and a place to rest was to honor the divine spirit within every person. This act transformed the home from a private shelter into a public sanctuary, weaving a network of mutual care that held society together. The fifth and final duty extended this circle of compassion to its absolute limit. The Bhuta Yajna was the sacrifice to all living beings. This was the offering made to creatures great and small, from the crows and ants to the unseen spirits of the land. A small portion of food would be scattered outside, a humble gift for the beings who shared the world. This act acknowledged a breathtaking truth that humanity's debt was not just to gods and sages, but to the entire web of life itself. Together, these 5 daily sacrifices framed existence as a continuous cycle of receiving and giving. You received light from the gods, life from your ancestors, knowledge from the sages, community from other humans, and a world from all beings. The only proper response was to give back in a constant, graceful rhythm of reciprocity. This was the Vedic ideal of a full life, one lived in conscious, grateful partnership with the entire universe. This gift was more than a simple donation. It was a spiritual transaction of immense weight, the Gadana, the ritual giving of a cow to a learned Brahmin priest. In a society built on reciprocity, this was considered the ultimate act of generosity, a deed of such merit that it could shape a soul's final journey. The cow was not just an animal, it was a complete universe of sustenance. It provided milk, butter, curds, and fuel from its dung. It was a living symbol of the earth itself, gentle, nurturing, and endlessly giving. To offer such a complete source of life to a priest, a man who upheld the cosmic order, was to perform an act of profound cosmic alignment. The giver was not merely giving away wealth, they were channeling the earth's bounty directly into the spiritual heart of the community. But the stakes of this ritual were even higher than life itself. The ancient texts speak of a terrifying boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the ancestors, a raging river called the Vaitarani. This was no ordinary river. Its waters were said to be made of blood and pus, filled with terrible monsters, a final, gruesome obstacle for the soul to cross. A person who had lived a righteous life might find a bridge or a gentle ford, but for the average soul, the crossing was a dreadful ordeal. This is where the gifted cow revealed its ultimate power. The belief was that the very cow a person had donated in their lifetime would be waiting for them on the treacherous banks of the Vaitarani. The benevolent animal would allow the soul to grasp its tail, and with a mighty pull would safely tow them across the horrific current to the peaceful shores of the afterlife. The Gadana was therefore an investment in one's own eternal future. It was a sacred insurance policy taken out with a living, breathing premium. The ritual transformed an economic asset into a spiritual ferryman, ensuring that the final, most frightening journey would not be made alone. The student's long exile from the world was over. After years of living in his teacher's hermitage, sleeping on the ground, and begging for his daily food, the time had come for a profound transformation. This was the Samavartana, the ritual of return, a ceremony that dissolved the identity of the humble student and prepared him to step back into society as a man. The central act was a ritual bath of immense symbolic power. Having spent his youth immersed in the abstract waters of sacred knowledge, he now immersed his body in a physical river. As the water flowed over him, it was believed to wash away the last remnants of his student life, purifying him for the worldly responsibilities that awaited. He emerged from the river not just clean, but fundamentally changed, reborn for a new stage of life. Next came a poignant gesture of closure. Throughout his education, the student had worn a simple girdle made of munya grass, a belt that symbolized his discipline, his celibacy, and his submission to his guru. In a solemn moment, he would untie this girdle and return it to his teacher. This was not the return of a mere object, it was the surrender of an entire identity. The act of giving back the girdle represented the completion of his debt to his teacher. He was no longer a brahmacharin, a seeker of knowledge. He was now a snataka, one who has bathed, a graduate ready to build a home and a family. His teacher would then offer him final gifts, new clothes fit for a householder, and his first personal instructions on how to navigate the complexities of social and moral life. The young man, once dependent on his guru for every lesson, was now entrusted with his own destiny. The Samavartana was a rite of passage that balanced two great human needs, the need for deep learning in seclusion and the need for active contribution in the world. It marked the moment a reservoir of sacred knowledge was released, ready to flow into the streams of everyday life. Yet this profound transition from student to householder could only be fulfilled through one final sacred partnership. The Vivaha, the Vedic marriage ceremony, was far more than a social contract. It was a cosmic rite, a complex ritual of transformation designed to weave two individual souls into a single spiritual force for upholding the world's order. The journey began with the Kanyadana, the gift of the daughter. In a solemn moment, the father would take his daughter's hand and place it into the groom's hand, often over a vessel of water. This was not a transaction of property, but a sacred transfer of responsibility. The water symbolized purity and the unbroken flow of lineage. By this act, the father was entrusting the continuity of his family's spiritual duty to the new couple, charging them with the solemn task of continuing the ancestral line and its sacred obligations. With hands now joined, the couple moved to the heart of the ritual, the panigrahana, performed before the sacred fire. The groom would clasp the bride's hand, his fingers closing over hers, while reciting mantras that spoke of longevity, strength, and shared purpose. This was the moment of binding. Their physical union, sanctified by Agni's witness, represented the joining of their individual destinies into one shared path. They were no longer two separate people, but a single entity dedicated to a common dharma, a united front in the great work of life. Then came the most definitive step, the Saptapadi, the 7 steps. With the ends of their garments tied together, the couple took 7 steps around the sacred fire, each step a vow for their future life. With the first step, they prayed for nourishing food. With the second, for physical and mental strength. The third step was for prosperity gained through righteous means, the fourth for happiness and harmony. The fifth step was for the welfare of all living beings, the sixth for long seasons of joy together. And with the seventh and final step, they pledged eternal friendship and companionship, becoming lifelong partners in the truest sense. The ancient texts declare that marriage is only complete after these 7 steps are taken, cementing a bond considered unbreakable. The ceremony culminated in the Lajahamam, a poignant offering of shared commitment. The bride would place her hands over the groom's, and together they would pour parched rice into the fire. The rice, puffed and light, symbolized the ego, the individual self. As the grains crackled and vanished in the flames, it was a final, dramatic surrender of their separate identities. They were offering their individual selves to the divine fire, emerging from the smoke as a new, unified being. The Vivaha wove every element of existence into its fabric, from the ancestral duty of the Kanyadana to the cosmic vows of the Saptapadi. It transformed a man and a woman into a living altar, a single flame with 2 wicks, whose shared life would now become an offering unto the world itself. Even the most beautifully woven life reaches its final thread. The Antyeshti, the last of the personal sacraments, was a solemn, meticulous ritual designed to guide a soul on its most difficult journey, the passage from the world of the living to the realm of the ancestors. This was not an end, but a transformation, a careful dismantling of the physical body to release its eternal occupant. The process began with cremation, an act charged with profound meaning. The body, washed and anointed, was carried to the burning ground. The chief mourner, often the eldest son, would circle the pyre with a clay pot filled with water. Then, with a heavy heart, he would strike the pot, shattering it. The sound of breaking clay was a powerful symbol of finality, representing the shattering of the deceased's earthly attachments and the breaking of the physical vessel that had housed their soul. He would then light the pyre using a sacred flame brought from the household hearth, uniting the end of life with the fire that had witnessed its daily rituals. As the flames consumed the body, the ritual turned to the delicate task of collection. The next day, the mourners would return to the ashes. They searched carefully for specific bones, particularly the unburnt skull and hip bones. These were gathered, washed with milk and honey, and placed in a funeral urn. This was not an act of morbid preservation. These bones were seen as the last, purest essence of the physical form, the final seed from which a new, spiritual body would be formed in the next world. The urn would be kept in the home for nearly a year, a quiet, sobering presence that allowed the family to gradually adjust to their loss while continuing to care for the departed. During this period, the soul was believed to be in a vulnerable, transitional state known as a preta, a ghostly being caught between worlds. It was a hungry, restless spirit, not yet settled in its new home. To nourish and guide this preta, the family performed a series of offerings called the Sapandikarana. For 10 days after the cremation, they would leave out small balls of rice known as pindas along with water. Each daily pinda was an act of profound compassion, offering the wandering soul sustenance and a tangible connection to its former life, helping it build the spiritual body it would need for the afterlife. The final and most crucial offering came on the 12th day. The family would prepare a special pinda, symbolically uniting the soul of the recently deceased with the 3 preceding generations of ancestors. This single, powerful act of ritual incorporation transformed the preta. It was no longer a lonely, wandering ghost. It was now officially a Pitta, a full-fledged ancestor, welcomed into the celestial community of the forefathers. What was the destination of this carefully guided soul? The early texts describe a journey fraught with challenges. The soul had to cross the terrifying river Vaitarani, a stream flowing with blood and filth, guarded by fearsome beings. Its success depended on the moral weight of its life and the precision of the funeral rites performed on its behalf. A righteous soul, supported by the offerings of its family, would find a bridge or a boat or be pulled across by a cow it had donated in life. It would then ascend to the world of the fathers, the Pittaloka, a realm of light and peace where it would reside with the ancestors, watching over the living and awaiting its own eventual return in the cycle of rebirth. The Antyeshti was the final, loving duty of the living toward the dead, a ritual that understood death not as a full stop, but as a sacred comma in the eternal sentence of the soul. The celestial rhythm of life was not only marked by the sun's daily journey, but by the moon's silent, monthly dance. Every new moon and every full moon, the Vedic householder performed the Darsha Purnamasa, a sacrifice so fundamental it was considered a compulsory debt owed to the gods. On these two pivotal days each month, the ritual fire became a stage for a simple yet profound offering of cakes. The contrast between the two ceremonies was deliberate and beautiful. For the Darsha, the new moon sacrifice marking the moon's disappearance, the offering was a single, unleavened rice cake, baked hard on the embers. This solid, unadorned cake represented the moon in its latent, potential state, a seed of light waiting to be reborn from the darkness. Then, 15 nights later, for the Purnamasa, the full moon sacrifice, the offering transformed. Now the priest prepared 2 rice cakes, but these were not baked. They were boiled soft in a pot, becoming tender and moist. This shift from one hard cake to 2 soft ones was a direct reflection of the moon's own journey. It symbolized the fulfillment of its cycle, the full blossoming of its luminous power, now ripe and overflowing. These were not random snacks for the deities. The new moon cake was offered specifically to the god Agni and the deified plant Soma, the very forces of transformative fire and sacred essence. The full moon cakes were given to Indra, the king of gods, and his consort, a recognition of the moon's peak power aligning with celestial sovereignty. This twice-monthly rhythm did more than just mark time. It wove the human community into the very fabric of the cosmos. The waxing and waning of the moon became the metronome for all ritual activity, the basic pulse from which the more complex ceremonies like the Soma sacrifices took their cue. To neglect this duty was to fall out of sync with the universe itself, to ignore the gentle, persistent ticking of the cosmic clock that governed everything from the tides to the seasons of the human heart. There is a fire altar in the shape of a bird, built from 1,021 precisely fired bricks, and its construction was a ceremony that lasted for an entire year. This was the Agnihotra, the piling of the altar, arguably the most elaborate and physically demanding rite in the entire Vedic world. It was not merely a construction project, it was a monumental act of cosmic recreation. The altar's most common form was that of a great bird of prey, an eagle or a falcon, with its wings outstretched as if ready to take flight. This was no accident. The bird was a symbol of Agni, the fire god himself, who in his celestial form was the sun, the great raptor soaring across the sky. To build this altar was to build a vessel for the divine, a permanent home for the god of fire on earth. The sheer scale of the labor was staggering. Every single brick had to be handcrafted from a specific type of clay, dried, and then ritually fired in a special kiln. There were not just a few bricks, there were thousands, each one assigned a specific name, a specific mantra, and a specific, non-negotiable place in the grand design. The priests did not simply stack them. They performed the entire Soma sacrifice on the bare ground first, and then, layer by sacred layer, they began the piling. Each brick was consecrated with butter and a specific hymn as it was laid into place. The chanting was constant, a river of sound guiding each brick to its cosmic location. But what was the ultimate purpose of this year-long architectural marvel? The entire ritual was a reenactment of the primordial sacrifice of the cosmic giant Purusha. Just as the universe was built from the dismembered parts of that first being, this altar was being built from the ritually consecrated bricks, each one representing a part of his body or a part of the cosmos itself. The sacrificer, the man who commissioned this immense undertaking, was not just a spectator. He was the human center of this cosmic drama. As the altar rose layer by layer, it was believed that his own mortal, flawed body was being symbolically taken apart and rebuilt alongside it. His physical form was being replaced brick by sacred brick with a new divine body made of fire and mantra, a body fit for communion with the immortal gods. When the final brick was placed and the sacred fire was kindled upon this new, colossal altar, it was not just a fire that was lit. It was a new universe, and the sacrificer was now the living soul at its very center, reborn through a full year of relentless sacred effort. But the most profound rituals were not just echoes of the cosmos, they were its very heartbeat. The Gavamayana was a ceremony that stretched across an entire solar year, a long journey of Soma sacrifices known as the cow's path. This name is a beautiful and deliberate metaphor. In the Vedic world, the cow was a symbol of movement, nourishment, and the steady, plodding rhythm of life itself. Just as a herd of cows would follow a set path to their grazing grounds day after day, this ritual traced the sun's own annual journey through the heavens. It was a year-long act of sympathetic magic, a human ritual designed to walk in lockstep with the sun, ensuring its strength and its reliable return. The Gavamayana was structured as a continuous series of Soma pressings and offerings, but its intensity was not uniform. It ebbed and flowed with the seasons, building to two powerful climaxes that bookended the year. As the days grew shorter and the sun appeared to weaken in the lead up to the winter solstice, the rituals intensified. The priests performed what were known as the Abhiplava and Pravritia days, a sequence of 6 pressings of Soma in a row. This was a ritual surge of energy, a concentrated effort to support the sun at its most vulnerable point, to give it the strength to turn back from the brink of darkness and begin its slow climb toward the summer. Then, after the solstice, the ritual entered its second major phase, culminating at the summer solstice with another intense period of offerings. This was the moment of the sun's peak power, and the ceremony shifted to a celebration and a reinforcement of that achieved strength. The entire year-long cycle was a microcosm of the solar year, a dramatic performance where the relentless rhythm of Soma sacrifices, chants, and offerings became the engine of cosmic regeneration. The priests were not just observers of the seasons, they were active participants in the sun's great journey, walking the cow's path to make sure the sun never strayed from its own. Far from the ordered flames of the household fire and the grand chants of the royal sacrifices, another kind of power was being sought in the wild. The Rigveda gives us a fleeting, haunting glimpse of a figure known as the Kessin, the long-haired one. This was no priest chanting in a consecrated enclosure. The Kessin was a solitary wanderer, an ascetic who moved to a rhythm entirely his own. The hymns describe him as being garbed in nothing but tattered, soiled rags, or sometimes in the ruddy brown of the earth itself. His most defining feature was his long, unkempt hair, a wild mane that marked him as someone who had utterly rejected the norms of settled society. He is said to live in a state of constant, ecstatic intoxication, but not from the sacred Soma. Astonishingly, the texts state that he drinks poison, sharing this deadly cup with the powerful god Rudra himself. Yet he lives unharmed, surging with a frenzied energy that connects him directly to the wind and the sky. He is a friend of the gods, a being who rides on the tempest, his soul soaring to realms the householder could never conceive. What were the rites of such a man? They left no altars, no bricks, no detailed manuals. His ritual was his very existence. His offering was his own body, pushed to its absolute limits through hunger, exposure, and a radical embrace of what others feared. He consumed poison not to die, but to transmute it, to prove that ecstasy could be found even in the heart of death. His long, matted hair was not a sign of neglect, but a sacred antenna, a conduit for drawing raw, untamed cosmic power directly into his being. The Kessin represents a path to the divine that ran parallel to, and often in deliberate opposition to, the mainstream Vedic world. While priests sought to control the cosmos through precise formulas, the Kessin sought to merge with it through wild abandon. He was the original shaman, the god-possessed mystic whose rite was a solitary dance with the terrifying, beautiful chaos at the edge of all creation. While the Gavam Ayana stretched across the seasons, the most intense trials of devotion were compressed into a single, relentless night. The Ataratram was this ultimate marathon, an extension of the classic Soma rite that pushed the boundaries of human endurance and spiritual focus. Its name means the one that extends through the night, and it did exactly that. Beginning at sunset, this ceremony did not pause for sleep or rest. It was a continuous, forceful surge of ritual activity designed to break through the ordinary limits of time and consciousness itself. The framework was the Agnish letter 1e6 the basic form of the Soma sacrifice, but the Ataratram amplified it to an extraordinary degree. The standard rite included 3 pressings of the Soma plant at dawn, noon, and evening. The Ataratram added a 4th and 5th pressing, pushing the ritual deep into the darkness. As the world fell silent and the stars wheeled overhead, the priests remained at their posts. The rhythmic chanting of hymns never ceased, the fires were kept blazing, and the sacred Soma juice continued to flow. This was not merely a longer ceremony, it was a deliberate assault on the normal cycle of day and night. The Vedic people saw the night as a realm of uncertainty and potential chaos, a time when the cosmic order was at its most vulnerable. By performing the most potent ritual of all through these perilous hours, the participants were making a bold declaration. They were asserting that the power of sacrifice could illuminate the deepest darkness, that human devotion could hold back the tide of chaos until the sun was reborn at dawn. Each additional hymn, each extra libation of the invigorating Soma, was a direct charge of spiritual energy sent into the cosmos, sustaining the world through its most fragile phase. The goal was a higher, more refined state of being. The relentless, night-long focus was meant to exhaust the participants' ordinary minds, to wear down their physical senses until a new, more profound awareness could dawn within them. They sought to achieve a state of unified consciousness, a complete merging with the divine essence they were so tirelessly invoking. The Ataratram was the ritual equivalent of a rocket pushing past the atmosphere, leaving the familiar world behind to touch a purer, more radiant realm of existence. The Antyeshti was the final farewell, but the relationship with the ancestors was a bond that required constant tending. This is where the Shraddha ceremony came to life, a recurring ritual of remembrance that transformed the one-time funeral into an enduring conversation between the living and the dead. Unlike the finality of the last rites, the Shraddha was a regular, nourishing duty performed monthly or annually. Its name itself comes from the word for faith, a profound trust that these tangible acts in our world had a direct and vital impact on the well-being of those in the next. The heart of the ceremony was the offering of pindas, those specially prepared rice balls, and libations of cool water. But this was not a generic offering to all ancestors. The ritual was intensely personal and specific. The head of the household, often the eldest son, would invoke his recently departed father by name, then his grandfather, and then his great-grandfather. For each one, he would meticulously prepare and offer a dedicated pinda. Why such specificity? The Vedic people believed that in the afterlife, the ancestors retained their individual identities and consciousness. A father who had passed away was not a vague spirit, he was still your father, existing in a different dimension. These pindas were not just food, they were the very substance that sustained his spiritual body, maintaining his strength, his status, and his happiness in the realm of the pittas. Without these regular offerings, an ancestor could weaken, becoming a hungry, dissatisfied ghost unable to bestow blessings or even capable of causing misfortune. The ceremony was a sacred cycle of mutual care. By nourishing a specific ancestor with these balls of rice and sesame, the living family was ensuring that their forefather remained a powerful, benevolent guardian. A contented ancestor firmly established in the Pitaloka would watch over the family, ensuring the health of children, the success of harvests, and the continuity of the lineage itself. The Shraddha was more than memory, it was an active partnership. It acknowledged a breathtaking truth that the love and duty we hold for our family does not end at the pyre, but continues as a thread of faith woven from pindas and prayers, connecting generations across the silent river of death. Even the sacred river of Vedic knowledge was not meant to flow without pause. It followed its own seasonal banks, governed by two pivotal rituals that marked the rhythm of learning itself. These were the Utsarjana and the Anutsarjana, the suspension and the recommencement of Vedic study. For the student living in his teacher's hermitage, life was not a continuous lecture. The academic year was divided into two distinct halves, each with its own purpose and its own sacred sanction. The Utsarjana was the ritual of departure, performed at the beginning of the rainy season. As the dark clouds gathered and the first heavy drops began to fall, the student's formal recitation of the Vedas was ceremonially suspended. This was not a holiday. The rainy season was a time of immense fertility and growth, but also of introspection and danger. Travel became impossible and the world seemed to turn inward. It was considered an inauspicious time for the rigorous, outward-focused work of learning and chanting the powerful hymns. The very atmosphere was thick with other energies, and to force the sacred syllables into that space was seen as a disharmonious act. So the student would perform the Utsarjana, a formal rite that put his studies to sleep for 4 entire months, allowing both the natural world and his own mind to settle into a different kind of rhythm. Then, as the skies cleared and the bright half of the year returned, the Anutsarjana ritual was performed. This was the joyous recommencement, the official restart of the Vedic term. The suspension was lifted, and the student could once again take up the disciplined recitation of the hymns. This cyclical pattern reveals a profound understanding of the learning process. The Vedic sages recognized that the mind, like the earth, needs its fallow periods. Constant, uninterrupted study could lead to burnout or a shallow, rote understanding. The 4 months of suspension were not wasted. They were a time for the seeds of knowledge to germinate in the quiet soil of the subconscious, for the student to reflect on what he had already learned and to mature in his understanding without the pressure of new input. By tying this academic calendar directly to the monsoons and the sunshine, they were making a powerful statement. The pursuit of the highest knowledge was not separate from the natural world, but was a part of its fundamental cycle. To learn was to participate in the same rhythm that governed the harvest and the seasons, a dance between intense activity and necessary rest that kept the river of wisdom flowing pure and strong. The sacred bond between generations was nurtured even before a child drew its first breath. Deep within the Vedic world, a quiet ceremony celebrated the profound mystery of pregnancy, the Simantamayana, or the hair-parting rite. This was not a public spectacle, but an intimate samskara performed in the 4th or 8th month of pregnancy, focusing all its protective energy on the mother and the unseen life growing within her. The central act was both simple and deeply symbolic. The husband would gently take a porcupine quill, its tip dipped in a paste of curd and kusha grass, and use it to part his wife's hair. He would do this 3 times, each stroke moving from the front of her head towards the back. This was far more than a grooming ritual. The careful parting of the hair was believed to open a channel, clearing a sacred pathway for positive influences and divine blessings to flow directly to the unborn child. It was a physical act of clearing the way for mental and spiritual clarity. Following this, he would adorn her hair with fragrant flowers and unbreakable amulets. Every element was a prayer made manifest. The flowers represented beauty and auspiciousness, while the amulets served as tangible shields against any negative forces that might threaten the vulnerable mother and child. The entire ceremony was accompanied by soft, potent Vedic mantras. These were not generic chants, but specific prayers for the robust health of the mother and the complete development of her baby. They invoked deities for physical strength and, remarkably, for the intellectual awakening of the child's mind, pleading for the gift of sharp intellect and wisdom from the earliest moment of existence. This rite reveals a sophisticated and tender aspect of the Vedic worldview. The community's future, its very lineage, was understood to depend on the well-being of the mother. Her physical and mental state was not a private matter, but a cosmic concern. The Simantamayana acknowledged that the foundation of a great soul was laid not in the classroom, but in the womb, and it sought to build that foundation with love, protection, and the most ancient blessings they knew. And so, after months of careful preparation and protective rites, a new soul finally crossed the threshold into the world. The very first moments of life were met not with simple care, but with a profound and immediate ceremony, the Jatakarma. This was the rite of birth, a swift and potent sequence of actions designed to welcome the infant not just into a family, but into the entire cosmic order. Before the child even tasted its mother's milk, it was given its first sacred meal. The father would carefully prepare a tiny portion of a powerful mixture, gold-hued ghee and sweet, pure honey. Using a golden spoon or sometimes just his own finger, he would place this blend on the newborn's tongue. This was not mere sustenance. The honey symbolized the sweetness of a long and fortunate life, while the ghee, the essence of purity and sacrifice, represented spiritual illumination. This first taste was a blessing for the body and the soul, a ritual infusion of vitality and wisdom meant to fortify the child for the journey ahead. Then, in a moment of incredible intimacy, the father would lean close to the infant's ear. In the quiet of that first day, before the name was announced to the world, he would whisper it softly into the child's hearing. This was not a public declaration. It was a private transmission, a sacred secret shared between father and child, as if planting the seed of identity directly into the soul's consciousness. The belief was that the soul, freshly arrived, would recognize its new name and take firm hold of its earthly life. These acts, performed within hours of birth, were a powerful assertion that a human life was a spiritual event of cosmic importance. The Jatakarma wove the newborn into the ancient tapestry of lineage, duty, and divine connection from its very first breath. With this final rite, the circle of the 30 great mysteries is complete, a journey that spans from the first whispered name to the final sacred offering, mapping the entire human experience onto the vast canvas of the Vedic universe. These 30 rites formed a grand and intricate machine, a spiritual technology whose single purpose was to uphold the cosmos. At its core was the unshakable principle of Artya, the invisible order that held the stars in their courses and the seasons in their turn. The Vedic people saw the universe not as a self-sustaining mechanism, but as a delicate balance that required constant human participation to remain stable. Every flicker of the Agnihotra fire, every drop of Soma offered, every chant sung into the dawn was a deliberate act of maintenance. They believed the sun rose each morning not merely by natural law, but because their sacrifices helped push it across the sky, reinforcing the cosmic order against the ever-present threat of chaos. This was the ultimate responsibility of humanity, to become the active stewards of reality itself through a continuous cycle of sacred labor. This grand effort operated on a simple, yet profound, law of exchange the ancients would have understood as do ut des, I give so that you may give. It was the fundamental contract of existence. A king did not perform the immense Ashvamedha simply to display his power. he was making a massive investment in the cosmic economy. By offering a kingdom's worth of wealth and a sacred life, he expected a return of unshakable sovereignty, fertile lands, and enduring lineage. A householder pouring milk into the flames each evening was not just performing a duty, he was depositing a small measure of his world's essence into a divine bank, trusting it would yield a return of health, reign, and prosperity for his family. Even the terrifying symbolism of the pure-ashamed followed this logic. The surrender of the individual ego was an offering made in exchange for spiritual liberation. Nothing was truly for free, not even the grace of the gods. The entire universe was viewed as a web of reciprocal obligations, and these rituals were the precise, formalized language through which humanity negotiated its place within it. So what became of this magnificent engine of sacrifice? Its fires did not simply go out. Over centuries, the external, elaborate ceremonies began to turn inward. The idea that a massive public ritual was necessary to achieve a goal slowly transformed into the belief that the same result could be accomplished through internal meditation, through the private sacrifice of one's own desires and ego. The grand altars of brick and fire were internalized as altars of the heart and mind. Yet the legacy of these 30 mysteries is woven into the very fabric of history. They represent one of humanity's most ambitious and sustained attempts to answer a timeless question. What is our role in the great story of the universe? Are we merely passive inhabitants, or are we active participants with a sacred responsibility to add our own thread to the cosmic tapestry? The Vedic seers answered with fire, with chant, and with an unshakable faith that the smallest human act, when performed with intention and reverence, could indeed help hold the whole world together. From the cosmic ambition of the Ashvamedha to the quiet intimacy of the Jatakama, these 30 rites map the entire landscape of the human soul. They form a breathtaking constellation of belief, where the grandest imperial spectacle and the simplest household offering were seen as equally vital threads in the cosmic fabric. This was the profound mystery of early India, a civilization that built its spiritual bedrock not on a single scripture or a solitary god, but on a living, breathing ecosystem of ritual. Every fire lit, every chant sung, was a declaration that humanity held a sacred responsibility to participate in the universe's endless dance of order and chaos, of giving and receiving. The philosophy that emerged from this world of fire and mantra would go on to shape countless generations, turning inward to explore the very consciousness that once sought to command the gods. So we are left with a final reflection after this long journey through time. Among these enigmatic ceremonies, from the symbolic rebirth of the pure-ashamed to the wild ecstasy of the Kessin, which one captures your imagination most deeply? Was it the sheer scale of the Agnihotra or the profound daily devotion of the Panchamahayajnas? Share which of these ancient mysteries resonates with you and why in the comments below, and join us as we continue to uncover the hidden stories of our past.